On behalf of the entire world, 2020 was a wreck and a half. When it feels like the world is on fire and also at a standstill for several months, I think it's safe to say that we're over this year. But at least many of us were able to escape into video games to distract us from a deadly virus, including me. Even though I didn't play as much as I wished, I was able to discover new games and fall into old favorites to get me through this year. But these specific games helped me cope and survive 2020. Let's rewind all the way back to January. Back when we were so naive. I was on winter break and ironically not even relaxing because I was too busy prepping for VEDIF. I suppose I desperately needed something exciting to play, so then I went to, not eBay, but the GameStop website out of all places. To this day I don't know why I went there. But did you know that they sell retro games on their website? I definitely didn't. Obviously their online store wasn't as robust or competitive or reliable as eBay, but then I saw it. Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga being listed for $15. I guess I needed to play a new GBA game that wasn't Pokemon for once, so I bit the bullet and purchased it from GameStop's website. And sure enough, it actually came in the mail, and from the looks of it, it looks completely authentic. So good job, GameStop. You didn't sell me a bootleg. I played and loved Paper Mario, so I finally gave Mario's other RPG a chance. And I gotta say, for a GBA game, it's quite lengthy and full of content. I still have yet to beat it because I have a tendency to take forever, and this is no exception. I always seem to have like 5 games I've been meaning to finish at the same time, but then I can't decide on which one to continue, so I just don't touch them. Regardless, Superstar Saga is pretty fun. I can never get enough of timing my button presses for a stronger attack. That will always be fun. I've also learned that I'm extremely uncoordinated with bros attacks, even with the guides. So 90% of the battles are just me doing regular attacks, and I'm sure it's gonna stay that way until the very end. But I can't get over how alive this game is, especially on a handheld. Every character exudes so much personality with dialogue and facial expressions. They somehow made navigating the world varied with the very little amount of buttons on the GBA. I don't know how they pulled that off. I love the little minigames to break up the battles. It shows that this is not a serious story. You're meant to have fun. Did I ever get stuck and frustrated? Obviously, I get stuck in like every new game I play, but I can guarantee that I never got bored. For a nearly 20-year-old game that is relatively unpopular, that's when you know that you got a quality retro game in your hands. Fast forward to the infamous month of March, when the entire world shut down in a panic due to this tiny little virus called COVID-19. It's almost a sick joke that New Horizons released right when the lockdown happened for us. I was on spring break right before the pandemic became a serious problem. I remember my biggest concern at the time was not being able to play the new game with my classmates on campus. Little did I know that not only did my concern come true, but I was also going to have an extended spring break. For months. No doubt, the first few months of quarantine were traumatic and paralyzing for a lot of us, which makes me all the more grateful for Animal Crossing New Horizons being the little life raft we all needed. Regardless of what mechanics and features were tampered with or left out, this game was an irreplaceable piece of refuge for a lot of us, including me. What a perfect game for people who need to escape the chaos of the real world, aka everyone on the planet, and the sale numbers show. I've seen people denounce New Horizons for not living up to the hype, either because they nitpicked what wasn't there, or they rushed to see everything there is through time traveling. I can't change people's opinions about this game if it no longer brings them joy. They're allowed to play however they want, but I think New Horizons serves as a metaphor for the pandemic, funnily enough. You can't rush Animal Crossing or quarantine. You're supposed to handle these experiences day by day, or else you'll end up frustrated and burnt out. If you're fixating on some features that aren't there, why they made things like this, and why in the world they changed that, instead of focusing on what they streamlined and what they brought to the table, you're essentially looking for an unrealistic version of New Horizons. I've seen and understood the valid complaints. This is not my first rodeo into Animal Crossing, but no game can fulfill everyone's wishes, even if they seem really obvious to some people. I avoided trying to do everything at once, and indulged in what was there. I can confidently say that I experienced what Animal Crossing does best, doing a little every day to achieve something worthwhile. Did I play this game the entire year? Of course not, but when I returned to it months later, I remembered why I fell in love with it in the first place. So many games nowadays are about making things faster, more instant, more stimulating. There's a time and place for those games, but New Horizons is one of the few modern games that actively encourages people to slow down and progress little by little, instead of anxiously looking for the end. And that perfectly matches how I got through 2020. A lot less dramatic, but just as sentimental, is an overlooked 3DS game from 2017, Miitopia. I know, 3DS and 2017 sound weird together. I thought so too. Several people, including myself, didn't bother looking at 3DS games after the Switch overshadowed everything. It wasn't until 3 years later that a Twitch streamer I follow named Born Brawler introduced me to this little game called Miitopia, a game I didn't know I needed in my life. I actually ended up buying the game for myself because of him. Remember Tomodachi Life, where you could customize any Mii and watch them interact and end up in silly situations? Miitopia is basically that, but set as a very casual RPG. That might sound like it shouldn't work as a game, but to me, it absolutely does. Just like Tomodachi Life, your fun mostly comes from your own customizations and imagination. I never really got the role-playing aspect of RPGs because I always fixated on reaching the end of the game, which is ironic considering the last game. But in Miitopia, the interactions between the Miis are so zany and endearing that I can't help but smile as my ragtag team of Mimis try to defeat the face-sealing villain. The basic elements of an RPG are present, like rolls, stats, and special attacks, but they take a backseat for your imagination to fill in the gaps. It's the little interactions between the Miis that you've created that make the game so much more personalized and lively. It's been a while since I've actively roleplayed in a video game like that. Miitopia is one of those games that may not be cinematic or a masterclass in design, but is just as endearing and engaging to me. It was a reminder to give one of the underrated games a chance once in a while. Experiencing the Paper Mario controversy unfold was at least entertaining to watch, I guess. It was the perfect storm of questionable design choices from developers, and the clear divide between fans, that makes just mentioning Paper Mario a one-way ticket to debating for hours on end. I only played up to Super Paper Mario, so I don't have a say in old versus new Paper Mario, but I can say that it's upsetting that developers are actively fighting to not design Paper Mario like before. I've seen the interviews, I've seen the articles. The whole thing was just needlessly muddy. So while Paper Mario was in a constant battle, I've heard of this little game called Bug Fables, a spiritual successor to the first two Paper Marios. That immediately caught my attention. I don't usually give smaller developers a chance, but I couldn't resist that kind of promise, and I'm so glad I gave it a chance. Like most RPGs, it's gonna take me a while to beat this game, but even where I'm at, I'm very impressed by how well they emulate the original formula. They accounted for pretty much every design staple. Badges, cooking, action commands, hilarious dialogue, everything is here and more. I thought that nothing but Mario could correctly capture the feel of Paper Mario, but this insect setting proved me severely wrong. They somehow made the story about bugs feel like an actual Paper Mario story. It's wizardry. Or probably good game design and writing. You can tell that the developers actually understood what made Paper Mario click. They understood what the fans wanted, and they improved on it. Imagine that! If the original developers won't bother continuing the original formula, you bet that there exist passionate fans that will fill that void, and maybe even do it better. Usually, I'm never the first to jump into games that blow up in popularity, but you know, when you're stuck in a pandemic with nowhere to go during the end of summer, it's difficult to avoid trends, especially when Fall Guys looks exactly like the game for me. Adorable beans with a colorful palette playing Mario Party like minigames? How could I resist? The last time I was part of a trending game was Pokemon Go back in 2016. Granted, nothing will match the craze of that movement, but given the circumstances of this year, I'm glad that this game blew up as it did. Word of mouth is still so fascinating, even if it's across the internet. There was something so magical seeing 59 other players across the world, all competing to win the crown, and then me losing the very first round. As I do. I sound so old. Much like Mario Party, losing constantly is beyond frustrating, but it's that addictive chance of maybe being that one player who wins that keeps me playing, aka a battle royale, and I can't get angry over that art style. If I ever create a game, this is what I want my art style to be. Fun and colorful, but not patronizing. This game doesn't hold your hand, but it can be understood by anyone. Anything that satisfies my inherent need for the chaotic fun of Mario Party gets a special pass in my book. Sadly, the hype only lasted in August and was quickly overshadowed by this next game, but I really enjoyed Fall Guys for what it was at the time. A spark of excitement in the midst of a year that felt like it was frozen and on fire at the same time. Talk about a sleeper hit. This is the kind of success story that gives me hope that gaming won't just be the next new thing, only to be discarded in a few weeks. Among Us was the little game that could. This game is all about completing a set of tasks and figuring out who's the imposter who is trying to kill everyone. You don't need fancy graphics, you don't need microtransactions, you don't need a gripping story, you don't need any of that for a successful game. All you need is a good idea, and that will take you much further. I always believed in the sentiment that you can do a lot with a little. Among Us takes that philosophy to heart. The developers made little game design decisions like sabotaging, venting, and emergency meetings that all work together to make it satisfying and replayable. This is probably so cheesy, but I appreciate how this game brought all kinds of people together. Even one of my teachers brought up this game, which shows how accessible it is. I managed to branch out and play with a bunch of new people, even if I didn't realize it. Among Us helped me to ever so slightly get better at socializing. One side effect is that you find out real quick what kinds of people you're playing with. It's terrifying how good some people are at manipulation. It's interesting to watch which kinds of people argue with each other. It's surprising to see who is the silent killer that no one expects. There's a reason why this game was so popular during the latter half of 2020. It brought us together when we really needed it. All it takes is a solid idea. All of the games I've listed before were games I played for the first time, but Splatoon 2 is the only game to break that rule. I'm always late to the party, but technically I started this game in 2019, but this game was that special to me. It may or may not have been an addiction all year. I definitely didn't boot up this game almost every day. I for sure didn't play this game instead of working on other important things. If you couldn't tell, I could not put this game down. There's something that's so immaculate about this game. You can infer that I played the original Splatoon to death, and you'd be right. Splatoon 2 is undoubtedly the perfect sequel. They built on top of the foundations of the original game that makes it infinitely more replayable. On top of the core gameplay best suited for my chaotic playstyle, they somehow converted this competitive shooter into the new cooperative salmon run, and have it make sense, and have it be addicting. How did they do that? There are definitely people who still play the original game, but you know the sequel is perfect when it maintains everything from the original game, and adds better features to give the game its own identity. That's how you make a sequel, more than the gameplay itself. I was able to enjoy this game with a close group of friends, something brand new to me, but something I cherished very much. As we lost horribly to Japanese players? Yes, it took this long, but for the first time, games were no longer an exclusively solo experience for me. I finally found a group of friends I feel completely comfortable with, something I desperately needed this year. If there's anything that 2020 has taught us, it's that we should never take things for granted. Like, ever. I sound like every other optimist, but there is truth in that, especially now. I've learned that the world does not care if you're struggling or not. It'll somehow find its way to make you grasp onto what really matters. It's very clear that there are injustices and chaos in the world, and it seems like this immovable monster ready to crush you at any moment. There was plenty of fear, anxiety, and frustration to go around. As much as I felt out of control from the rest of the world, I was able to control how I coped through it all. One of them being new experiences with video games. They're a special kind of escapism that can distract you from the world. Think critically about it. and everything in between. Did I still have stress? Did I have my valleys? Of course. Pretty sure everyone did. But these games helped alleviate the mundane, anxious, and longing moments of 2020. This will be in the history books for the world and especially for me, and that's something I can be grateful for. Thank you for watching. At least we made it out. Okay, bye.